The gym fell into a hush so complete that even the hum of the lights seemed to pause. Ava's trembling chords steadied beneath her fingers, and Iris's voice, fragile, then fierce, rose to meet it. Together, their harmony poured into the room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The smirks faded, the whispers stilled. By the final note, every heart sat suspended in awe, the silence broken only by the eruption of applause that left the twins blinking through tears, finally seen for who they were. If moments like this move you, subscribe to the channel and share where you're watching from, because there are many more stories like this waiting for you. The morning unfolded with the kind of gray light that seemed to carry yesterday's sorrows in its folds. Ethan Cole tugged the zipper of his daughter's worn jacket up to her chin, his calloused fingers gentle against the frayed edges. Lily's hair, a cascade of honey-brown strands, had escaped its braid again, and he smoothed it back with a tenderness that came from practice more than perfection. Their kitchen smelled faintly of toast and instant coffee, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only other voice in the room. Outside, a brittle wind shook the last leaves from the sycamores lining the street. "Ready, Bug?" he asked, his voice low, the kind of voice that steadied rather than pressed. Lily nodded, clutching her backpack straps. She was 10 now, old enough to sense the world's rougher corners, but still young enough to believe her father's presence could guard her from them. Ethan reached for his coat, heavy from years of wear, and the two stepped into the morning together. The air carried a damp chill that cut through fabric and skin, but Ethan walked with long strides, shoulders squared against it, while Lily skipped to match his pace. The school loomed ahead, its red brick walls catching the pale sun. Children's laughter and shouts carried on the air, though some tones rang with cruelty, a sharpness Ethan had learned to notice. He lingered near the fence as Lily dashed toward her friends, a smile ghosting across his lips. His life was a map of losses, his wife, his ease. The future he once thought was certain, but in Lily's laughter he still found a reason to stand upright. It was there, in that suspended moment of ordinary watching, that he noticed them. Two girls, nearly identical, sitting on the far side of the cafeteria's outdoor tables. They were slightly older than Lily, maybe 11, with the fragile thinness of children who carried too much silence. Their dark hair hung straight, parted neatly as though brushed by hands that cared but hurried. One of them, the bolder by the tilt of her chin, had her sketchbook half hidden beneath her tray. The other sat close, her eyes downcast, her body angled inward like a shadow. Around them, the swell of laughter surged again. A knot of boys at the next table leaned closer, grins sharp. "Sing something," one taunted. "Come on, twins, show us how you squeak." His voice carried, deliberate. The girls shook their heads, cheeks coloring. Their refusal only fueled the chorus. "Bet you can't even hit a note," another jeered. The bold one clenched her fists under the table, her jaw tight. The quieter one bit her lip, eyes swimming with unshed tears. Ethan's hand tightened on the fence. He could not hear their voices, only the silence pressed into them by others. It was the same silence he remembered from nights long past, when his wife, pale and wan in the last weeks, could no longer sing the lullabies she had once woven around Lily's crib. The house had felt emptier than death itself, because silence had taken the place of song. Looking at the twins, he recognized that same theft. The bell rang, scattering the moment, but its echo followed him home. That evening, the kitchen light painted soft gold across their small table. Lily dangled her legs from her chair, telling him about her day between bites of pasta. He listened, the way he always did, his focus steady even when his thoughts strayed. "Dad," she asked suddenly, her fork pausing in midair, "why do they always sit alone?" He looked up from his plate. "Who?" "The girls. The twins. No one sits with them." Ethan set his fork down, considering. He had never wanted Lily to carry the weight of cruelty too early, yet he knew she already felt its edges. Children saw more than adults admitted. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "people don't see what others carry inside. Sometimes it's easier to laugh than to listen." Lily's brow furrowed. "That's not fair." "No, he agreed softly. It's not. For a moment, the sound of the ticking clock filled the silence between them. Then Lily asked, "Do you think they're good at singing?" Ethan thought of the way the bolder one's jaw had tightened, the way the quieter one's eyes had lowered. He thought of his wife's guitar still leaning in the corner of their bedroom, strings waiting for hands that no longer existed. "I think," he said slowly, "that voices are like doors. Sometimes they stay closed until someone knocks gently enough." Lily studied him with the seriousness only children could carry. Maybe no one's knocked for them yet. He reached across the table, ruffling her hair. Maybe, that night, after Lily had drifted to sleep, he lingered by her door, listening to the soft rhythm of her breath. The house was too quiet, as it often was. His gaze fell toward the bedroom where the guitar rested, gathering dust. He had never been brave enough to play it again, not since the last notes had been hers. But the memory of the twins lingered, their silence pressing against him like a half-forgotten song. Sleep came late. When it did, it carried him not into dreams, but into fragments of memory. His wife's voice, low and sweet, humming as Lily gurgled in her crib. The hum shifting into laughter, then into stillness. He woke with the ache of it. The morning sun already nudging the blinds apart. The day began again, routine as ever, yet something beneath it had shifted. At the school fence once more, Ethan's eyes found the twins without searching. They sat together, shoulders nearly touching, the sketchbook again hidden. The boys at the nearby table had already begun their chorus, words sharper in the bright morning air. But Ethan's gaze lingered, not on the cruelty, but on the girls' hands, clasped together beneath the table, fingers entwined as if the world could not pry them apart. Something inside him stirred, the faintest echo of a promise he had once made to his wife, to raise Lily with gentleness, to never let silence define her. Perhaps, he thought, that promise extended beyond his own blood. As the bell rang and the children scattered, Ethan found himself still standing there, the wind tugging at his coat. He did not move until Lily's voice called from across the yard, pulling him back. He lifted a hand in answer, but his eyes strayed once more to the place where the twins had sat, their absence lingering like an unfinished note. The day carried on, errands and work filling its hours, yet every small silence seemed to carry their faces. That evening, as he folded laundry in the dim living room, he caught himself humming under his breath. The tune was unsteady, a fragment of the lullaby his wife had once sung. Lily, passing through, tilted her head. "Dad," she said softly, "you haven't done that in a long time." He paused, the fabric still in his hands. "Maybe it's time I did." The words settled in the room with a weight that surprised him, as though he had spoken not only to her, but to himself. Outside, the wind pressed gently against the windows, carrying with it the murmur of unseen things, like voices waiting to be heard, like doors waiting to be knocked upon. And for the first time in many years, Ethan felt the faint stirring of a story not yet told. The next morning brought with it a pale sun, stretched thin over the rooftops as though reluctant to warm the earth. Ethan stood at the edge of the playground once again, his hands buried deep in the worn pockets of his coat. Children darted across the asphalt, their voices weaving a tapestry of shrieks and laughter. But his gaze, as though by instinct, settled on the twins. Ava sat rigid on the bench, chin lifted like a soldier refusing surrender. Iris, smaller in presence though nearly identical in frame, leaned toward her sister, her eyes cast downward, the slope of her shoulders speaking what her lips did not. When the bell rang, scattering children like leaves on wind, Ethan moved closer. He spoke not with the authority of a teacher, nor the insistence of a stranger, but with a quiet steadiness born of long practice and gentleness. "You know," he said, his voice low enough that only they could hear, "singing isn't a joke if you sing from the right place." Ava's head turned sharply, her dark eyes narrowed, suspicion lighting them. Iris shifted uneasily, clutching her book tighter. For a moment, silence stretched, brittle as ice. Then Ava pulled her sister's arm, a wordless gesture that said, "We don't need him." They rose and walked away, their twin shadows merging into the crowd. Ethan watched them go, neither hurt nor surprised. Trust was a door that seldom opened to the first knock. Later that afternoon, when the school emptied into the chaos of parents and buses, Ethan found himself waiting again. Lily skipped to his side, her voice bubbling about art projects and playground games. But over her chatter, Ethan caught sight of the twins lingering near the curb. Their mother arrived in a rush, a woman in a nurse's uniform, hair pulled back in a bun that sagged from exhaustion. She apologized to the girls with a breathless smile, ushering them toward an aging sedan. In that glimpse, Ethan saw the weariness of late shifts and long nights etched into her face, the tired grace of someone who carried too much on too little sleep. The encounter pressed into him like a quiet revelation. These girls were not adrift by accident. They belonged to a world stretched thin, where song was a luxury, where voices often drowned beneath the weight of survival. Over the next week, Ethan adjusted his steps to fall in pace with the twins whenever chance allowed. At first, Ava bristled, her body angled like a shield, but Iris's curiosity tugged against her sister's caution. One evening, as they walked home beneath the fading light, Iris hummed, a sound so faint it might have been mistaken for the wind. Lily's head turned, her smile blooming. "You're good," she whispered. Iris startled, her cheeks coloring. Ava shot her a sharp look, but the truth of it was already out. The note had escaped, fragile and undeniable. Ethan, walking slightly behind, let the moment breathe. He knew better than to crowd it with praise. Sometimes silence was the most generous space to give. By the third afternoon, the girls lingered near his small house instead of darting directly inside theirs. Lily tugged them toward the porch, chattering about her school drawings. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, weighing a choice that had been simmering in him. He stepped into the house and returned with a guitar, its wood darkened by years, its strings still taut, though dust clung to its edges. "This belonged to Lily's mom," he said quietly, his thumb brushing the worn fretboard. "She played it every night when Lily was little. She'd have wanted it to keep singing." Ava's eyes flicked to the instrument, suspicion softened by the faint glow of longing. Iris looked as though she might reach out, but her hands remained folded tightly. Ethan crouched, holding the guitar out as though offering not just wood and strings, but a fragment of memory, a piece of faith. The girls hesitated. Then Ava, defiant even in curiosity, plucked a single chord. The sound rang thin, imperfect, but alive. Iris drew in a breath, and before she could stop herself, a trembling note escaped her lips. Ava frowned, but she did not silence her. Instead, she shifted, her voice joining her sister's, low and uncertain at first, then steadier. The two voices, separate yet twined, rose in fragile harmony. Ethan closed his eyes. It was not the polished song of practice, but the raw sound of something hidden too long. It filled the small porch with a haunting kind of beauty, like sunlight breaking through fractured glass. Lily clapped, her grin wide, while the twins' faces flushed with both embarrassment and pride. When the song dwindled into silence, Iris whispered, "We're not good." "You're honest," Ethan replied. "That's better than good." The words lingered, soft as the evening air. In the days that followed, the porch became a kind of refuge. After homework, after weary dinners, the girls found their way there. Sometimes they sang. Sometimes they only sat in the glow of the setting sun, their voices trailing off into laughter. Ava remained wary, her sharp edges intact, but even she softened under Lily's eager applause. Iris bloomed slowly, her voice gaining strength, each note like a step taken out of shadow. Ethan rarely said much. He tuned the guitar, adjusted their fingers, offered the kind of encouragement that felt more like permission than instruction. He remembered his wife's voice, remembered the way song had once filled his home, and though the memory ached, it no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a bridge. One evening, as the air grew cool and fireflies stitched light across the yard, Iris looked at Ethan with wide eyes. "Why are you helping us?" The question stilled the night. Ava's gaze sharpened, waiting. Ethan thought of all the ways he could answer. He thought of loss, of silence, of promises made to a woman who could no longer keep them. But when he spoke, his voice was simple. Because someone once helped me hear what I didn't know was inside me, and I think everyone deserves that chance. The twins said nothing at first, but Ava's hand found her sister's, squeezing once firm. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. The guitar lay between them, strings waiting. Ethan knew then that something had shifted. A door had opened, however slightly, and beyond it was a song still waiting to be sung. The announcement came on a Monday morning, carried through the crackling speakers of the school's intercom. A student showcase, the principal called it, an evening of small talents, recitals, and songs, where children could sign their names to perform before families and classmates. Most of the students erupted with chatter and excitement, but for some the idea was a weapon. By lunchtime, Ava and Iris's names had appeared on the sign-up sheet, not in their own hands, but scrawled there by a group of boys who smirked as they passed the paper around. "Can't wait to hear the squeaks," one muttered loudly enough for all to hear. Laughter rippled across the cafeteria. The twins sat frozen at their table, cheeks burning, caught between shame and fury. Ethan, who had come early to pick up Lily, overheard the boys' jeers from where he stood near the office door. His jaw tightened, though his face remained calm. He walked to the sign-up sheet when the crowd dispersed and quietly placed his own name beneath theirs, writing only one word beside it: Mentor. When the girls found the paper later, Ava's eyes blazed, but Iris, though pale, traced the letters of Ethan's name with the edge of her fingertip. That evening they arrived at his porch in silence. Ava set the guitar down as though it had betrayed her. "They think it's funny," she said, her voice sharp. "They want us to stand up there and look stupid." Ethan crouched so his eyes met theirs. The air smelled faintly of cut grass, and the sky burned with the first orange blush of sunset. "It could be that," he said steadily, "but it could also be the moment that changes everything." Ava scoffed, folding her arms. "We'll mess up." "Maybe," Ethan admitted. His voice was gentle, but there was no trace of pity. "But maybe you won't." Iris's gaze lingered on the guitar. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. "What if they laugh anyway?" Ethan reached out, adjusting the strap across her shoulder with care. "Then let them laugh. A song doesn't lose its beauty because someone refuses to hear it." Over the days that followed, preparation became their quiet ritual. Homework books lay scattered on Ethan's kitchen table, forgotten beneath pencils and dinner plates. The guitar rested against a chair, its wood catching the lamplight, while voices braided together in hesitant strands of harmony. Lily clapped along, cheering when their courage faltered, her laughter weaving warmth into the room. Ava's voice began sharp, clipped by fear, but softened as she learned to trust her own sound. Iris's notes wavered at first, but grew stronger each evening, carrying the fragile steadiness of someone who had been waiting a long time to speak. Ethan offered no grand speeches. He showed them how to steady a chord, how to breathe before a note, how to let silence work like a friend rather than an enemy. Sometimes he said nothing at all, only listening with eyes that told them they were enough. On the night of the showcase, the school gymnasium smelled of polished floors and nervous anticipation. Folding chairs filled the space. Parents and siblings crowded shoulder to shoulder. Children in bright costumes whispered their lines, fiddled with instruments, tugged at dresses. The twins stood near the stage steps, the hands clasped so tightly their knuckles whitened. Ava's chin lifted in defiance, but her eyes betrayed the quake beneath. Iris leaned into her sister, her lips moving silently, rehearsing words no one else could hear. Ethan stood beside them, a steadying presence. He rested one hand on Lily's shoulder and gave the girls a nod that asked nothing, promised only that he would be there no matter what came. When their names were called, a hush swept the crowd. Whispers stirred, the memory of the joke still fresh. Some students chuckled, expecting humiliation. The twins climbed the steps, each step heavier than the last. Under the glare of the stage lights, their faces seemed pale, nearly translucent, but their grip on the guitar was firm. Ava strummed the first chord, her hand stiff, the sound brittle in the cavernous gym. Iris's breath caught in her throat. for a heartbeat to silence threatened to swallow them. Then, almost imperceptibly, Ethan shifted at the side of the stage, his eyes meeting theirs. He didn't speak, didn't gesture, only held them with the kind of gaze that said, "You can." Iris opened her mouth. The first note was thin, fragile. Ava followed, her voice sliding into place beside her sister's like a hand into a glove. Together their sound wavered, then steadied, then bloomed. What began as a whisper rose into harmony that filled the gymnasium like light pouring through stained glass. The mocking smirks in the front row faltered. Teachers leaned forward. Parents stilled, the shuffle of feet and coughs replaced by rapt silence. The song was simple, no practiced polish, but it carried something richer than perfection. It carried truth. Their voices rose and folded into one another, not competing but completing, each line of melody like a thread weaving them into wholeness. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He thought of the nights his wife had sung in their living room, guitar in hand, while Lily giggled at her side. He thought of promises to keep song alive, of silence that had seemed permanent, and of how it was breaking now, not through him, but through these two girls who had once believed their voices worthless. His hand pressed lightly on Lily's shoulder. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with wonder, and he knew she understood the moment even without words. As the final chord faded, a stillness gripped the room. Then applause broke, first hesitant, then swelling into something thunderous. The twins lowered their heads, their cheeks flushed, unsure whether to bow or flee. But the applause didn't stop. It rolled over them, steady and insistent, until even Ava allowed a small smile to slip through her guarded face. Iris wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, still clutching the guitar as though it might vanish if she let go. They stepped down from the stage into a world transformed. The boys who had mocked them avoided their gaze. Teachers offered quiet nods. Parents whispered to each other. And through it all, Ethan stood waiting, his expression not triumphant but quietly proud. When the girls reached him, Ava opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she held out the guitar. Ethan shook his head gently. "Keep it for now," he said. "It suits you." Iris clutched it tighter, her eyes shining. "We didn't think we could." "You already could," Ethan answered softly. "You just needed to hear it yourselves." The applause still echoed faintly in the gym, even as the next act shuffled onto the stage. But for the twins, the sound that mattered most was the one that still trembled in their own chests, the realization that their voices had finally been heard. The applause carried the twins off stage like a tide that refused to ebb. Their faces were flushed, their breaths uneven, as though the song had emptied them and filled them all at once. Ethan walked at their side, steady as an anchor, while Lily skipped ahead, clapping her hands in delight. The gymnasium had already shifted into its next performance, but for Ava and Iris, the world had narrowed to the echo of a room that had finally gone silent for the right reasons. When the crowd dispersed at the end of the night, their mother found them near the doorway. Claire still wore her nurse's scrubs, the fabric creased and tired, her eyes shadowed by long hours. She froze when she saw the guitar in Iris's hands and the glow on both girls' faces. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling as though afraid the answer might vanish if spoken too loud. "They sang," Ethan said simply. Ava looked down at her shoes, still clutching her sister's hand, while Iris whispered, "They clapped, Mom. They really clapped." Claire's gaze flicked between them, then to Ethan, as tears welled without permission. She touched her daughter's hair, smoothing it back as though to be sure they were real. "I don't know what you did," she whispered, her voice cracking. "But thank you. They've never been this brave." Ethan shook his head. "I only gave them what was already theirs. Sometimes you just need someone to stand beside you." The ride home was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with fullness rather than absence. Ethan walked Lily back to their small house, her chatter bubbling about how Ava's hands had shaken, how Iris had nearly cried, how the song had made the room freeze like magic. He smiled down at her, letting her words wash over him. His heart carried a weight that felt different from grief, lighter, as though he had set something down after years of holding it. In the weeks that followed, the twins returned often. Their laughter began to mingle with Lily's in the kitchen, echoing down the narrow hallway. Ethan's fridge filled with their sketches, pinned beside Lily's crayon drawings, paper testimonies of belonging. The guitar leaned less often in the corner, its strings alive with new songs. Sometimes the girls sang alone, sometimes with Lily's small voice weaving through theirs. Each time, Ethan sat nearby, not as conductor or critic, but as a quiet witness to a world being mended note by note. Claire would arrive after shifts, apologizing for her lateness, though her daughters only smiled now, no longer weighed by waiting. She lingered longer with each visit, sometimes sharing a cup of coffee at Ethan's kitchen table, sometimes sitting on the porch while the children sang beneath the gathering dusk. Their conversations began in small offerings, stories of long hospital nights, of Ethan's years spent learning how to cook after his wife's passing. Slowly, the words grew into something softer, deeper, as though grief had made them fluent in the same language. One evening, rain swept the town, tapping against the windows as though urging the world to listen. The children sprawled on the rug, drawing by lamplight, their laughter rising above the storm. Claire sat across from Ethan, her hair damp, her hands cupped around the mug he had set before her. She looked at him for a long time before speaking. "You've given them something I couldn't," she said quietly. "You gave them courage." Ethan shook his head. It was already there. All I did was make room for it. Her eyes softened. "Still, you reminded me that they don't have to be small just because life has been hard." Their gazes lingered, and in that silence something unspoken passed between them. Not sudden, not dramatic, but steady, like the slow build of a song that had always been waiting. The weeks folded into months, each one weaving their lives tighter. The twins and Lily became inseparable, sleepovers filled with whispers and giggles, school projects done side by side, songs practiced until their voices melded like rivers joining. Ethan's small house grew warmer, not because of new things, but because of new presence. The quiet that had once pressed on him so heavily now felt like a pause between verses, always ready to be filled. One late evening, the children sat on the porch steps, humming a tune they had begun to call their own. Fireflies blinked in the yard, lanterns of summer weaving light into the shadows. Ethan stood beside Claire, their shoulders brushing. He could feel the steady rhythm of her breath, the nearness of her hand at her side. "They sound different now," she said, her voice carrying pride. "They sound like themselves," Ethan replied. For a moment, the only music was the children's voices drifting into the night. Claire turned her head, her eyes reflecting the glow of the porch light. "Your wife would have loved this," she said softly. Ethan swallowed, the old ache rising but softened by something new. "Her voice would have loved this," he murmured. Claire reached for his hand then, tentative at first, but steady once his fingers closed around hers. The children's song swelled, rising into the dark sky, carrying with it the promise of second chances, of found family, of quiet kindness that could reshape even the heaviest grief. Ethan stood in the hush of it all, his hand clasped in hers, and for the first time in years he felt the future not as a loss, but as a beginning. On the porch that night, as the twins and Lily sang softly under the glow of fireflies, Ethan's hand found Claire's, steady and sure. For the first time in years, the silence in his chest felt whole again, filled not with loss, but with belonging. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share where you're watching from, because there are many more stories like this still to be told.